Hey guys, this is VJ Dinakar. Today I want to talk about what you should do if you're contacted by CPS. CPS is Child Protective Services, and they investigate cases where there's a suspicion of neglect or abuse of a minor child. Now, how would you as a parent be investigated or contacted by CPS? There's a number of different ways. The first way, and it's a very common way I see in criminal cases I handle, is through a police referral, often in a domestic violence criminal case. So the scenario is that two parents are involved in an alleged domestic violence incident, and the minor child is present during that incident, and the police make an arrest of one of the parents for domestic violence. Per their protocol, the police are required to refer the matter to CPS for investigation because there's an allegation of violence occurring in the presence of the child. So at a later point, it could be the same day, or typically it's within a couple days. It can be as late as a month later, I've seen cases, where CPS will then reach out to the parents, usually by actually going to the house or sometimes by calling one of the two parents. But that's at that point that CPS will be potentially calling you and trying to interview you. That's one way that CPS can get involved in a matter. Another way is that a mandated reporter, and that's someone who under California law is required when they believe there's any basis that child abuse has occurred to inform CPS. And mandated reporters in California include teachers, nurses, doctors, any health practitioners, clergy, and other people who are mandated by law. And if they do not abide by this law, they're actually guilty of a misdemeanor to report to CPS suspicions of child abuse. So again, at that point, when they report to CPS, CPS will reach out to you or come to your house. Another way is that the other parent, in a situation where there's two parents and a child, and perhaps there's a separation, or perhaps there is going to be a separation and the parties are in conflict, one of the parents will call CPS and report that the other parent is engaged in some sort of neglect or child abuse. And at a later point, CPS will contact the parent that is accused of this abuse or neglect. The final way is that virtually anyone, a neighbor, someone else, an anonymous call, can actually inform CPS of alleged child abuse or neglect. Actually, the other way, and I've also seen this, is that the actual child themselves, typically a little bit of an older child, can directly call CPS. And of course, at that point, CPS will also try to interview you. So if you are contacted by CPS for any of these reasons I mentioned, what should you do? Well, what they're going to want you to do is submit to a full, thorough interview, an inspection of your home. Potentially, they're going to want to look at records, employment records. They're going to ask you all kinds of invasive questions. And at that point, what should you do? The answer is you should really treat CPS exactly like you should treat police. And I've made other videos where I've clearly said, and any criminal attorney would tell you, that you should absolutely not make any statement to police or CPS before asking for an attorney. So if you're approached by CPS, and it may not be something that you're in any way suspecting that CPS is going to be arriving at your door, or maybe you do know they're coming, but in either event, or it could be by phone call, you should certainly attempt to not have that interaction and immediately call your attorney, meaning you don't have to answer the door if they're coming to your house. You don't have to continue speaking with them. You can, if you're on the phone with them, ask for their contact information and tell them that you're going to get back to them with your attorney. If they come to your house and they don't have a warrant or a court order to, for instance, come into your home or speak with your child, which is typically very rare, then you're absolutely not required to speak to them. And again, you should call an attorney immediately. And the attorney will give you advice about whether you should ever speak to CPS. And if you are going to speak to CPS, the attorney should optimally be present, or at least the attorney should tell the CPS agent what the contours of the interview will be. For instance, if this is resulting from a domestic violence arrest situation, you should, as an arrestee, obviously absolutely not answer any questions related to the domestic violence incident, any prior allegations of domestic violence, and you should also not answer any questions about whether you, for instance, have spanked your child or used corporal punishment on your child. And if there is going to be an interview, you should be prepared for that interview. It will typically be at your house, and the CPS agent will be looking at the nature of your house. Is it clean? Is it maintained? Is there alcohol around the house? Are there drugs around the house? Are there any unsafe conditions around the house? So you need to be prepared thoroughly for this interview, even if the attorney ultimately suggests that it is in your interest to do this interview and answer only, for instance, biographical questions or rather routine questions, but certainly not address and not submit to any questions related to allegations of child abuse, child neglect, or domestic violence. Now, you might think that, and the CPS agent will certainly be nice to you, kind to you, make you think that they're on your side or in some way trying to serve you, but certainly they're not. What they're doing is investigating a suspicion that you have engaged in abuse and or neglect. And in that scenario, what their job is to do is to try to actually substantiate that allegation of abuse or neglect. And your job has to be to absolutely not give them any ammunition, whether that's true ammunition or false ammunition, to be able to substantiate that case. So again, what you need to first do is absolutely hire and contact an attorney and follow their advice and have the attorney contact CPS directly. Now, what are the dangers of CPS? Well, first and foremost, CPS really does have the power to take away your child. If they think that you are a danger to your child in terms of neglect or abuse, they can do that on an emergency basis where they're literally taking the child from your house and you have to have a court date in a couple days, or they could basically recommend that there be measures taken, like you have to take a class or you have to be surveilled, monitored, tested, all kinds of invasive requirements made on the basis of your interview. Additionally, if CPS makes any findings related to allegations of abuse or neglect, you could find yourself in the Child Abuse Central Index, or CACI. And that being on that index could absolutely prevent you, depending on your job, from maintaining certain positions, especially where you're dealing with children. So if you're a kindergarten or elementary or high school teacher and you find yourself in the CACI register, you really may well find yourself out of a job. You may find yourself out of a job when you're interacting with any children in the particular job that you have. Secondly, the CPS interaction, which didn't start initially as any criminal case. For instance, let's say that the other parent made this referral. They called CPS and said, hey, my former or current spouse hit my child and I want you to investigate. And after you interview, for instance, let's say you make a mistake and you don't call an attorney and you do submit to an interview. By the way, that interview is often not, in fact, usually not recorded. So unlike the police are using a body camera, this is not recorded. And so therefore, it's completely unclear what the CPS agent is going to say. But let's say that the other parent referred the case. You give an interview without an attorney. It's an invasive interview. The interview is not captured correctly in the report. And then on the basis of that interview, the CPS agent believes a crime was committed. And so they actually refer the matter to police. The police further investigate. They submit their investigation to the district attorney office. And now you found yourself involved in a criminal case of neglect or abuse. So again, this is the reason why you really need to hire an attorney. You can't interact with CPS yourself. That's a really dangerous idea to think, and it should be thought of as the same thing as interacting with police. The other issue with interacting with CPS, which is related to what I was just talking about, is that this could have drastic ramifications if you're involved in a custody battle in family court. So if the other spouse is trying to create a CPS case against you in order to get an advantage in your custody case, which often happens, and you submit to an interview, that interview, although it's in theory confidential, may end up being something that the judge in your family court is going to consider. And so again, another reason not to involve yourself in the interview except to hire an attorney and to allow that attorney to help get you out of the situation with CPS. Now, again, like I said, the attorney may well advise you that it is in your interest to actually ultimately, to some extent, cooperate with CPS, but they are going to limit the contours of that interview. Guys, if you find yourself involved in a CPS situation, you certainly need to reach out to an attorney. If you have any other questions about how to interact with CPS, let me know. Visit my website on vjlaw.com. Take care and all the best.